Okay, hello everyone and welcome to our meeting. We're going to be having some people joining late and maybe Lily leaving early. So there's going to be some changing going on during the meeting. We currently don't have quorum, so we're not going to be able to approve minutes or do anything like that until we have quorum or if we have quorum. And so Ian, do you want to read the script or Danielle, do you do
I can
that?
do that.
You do that now. Sorry.
That's okay. Okay, so good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us in this virtual meeting format. Just a quick housekeeping note before we begin tonight's meeting. For the members of the public who are joining the meeting via computer, device, or phone, please be advised that your microphone, webcam, and phone are automatically muted when you enter the meeting as an attendee. Commissioners, as a panelist, you are able to mute or unmute your video and mic at your discretion, but please mute yourself when you're not speaking to avoid any feedback or background noise. If you wish to participate during the public comment portion of the meeting and haven't already done so, please raise your virtual hand now to join the speaker's queue in one of two ways. For those viewing the meeting on a computer, laptop, or other device, click once on the blue hand icon. For those listening to the meeting on a phone, press *9. We will lower hands as speakers are called upon. When the public comment begins, we will announce your name and unmute your microphone. You will have 2 minutes to speak, after which your microphone will again be muted. Regarding the chat and Q&A function of Zoom, please note that attendees will not be able to use these features. Commissioners, please do not use the chat function for any purposes other than technological assistance, as attendees will not have access to these conversations. Lastly, this meeting will be recorded in accordance with HB 4212. Recordings will be posted to the Sustainability Commission website. As always, feel free to contact the Sustainability Commission if there's testimony you are not able to provide or wish to get to us in a different format. And with that, I turn the meeting over to Vice Chair Devin Mann.
Yes. Okay, so Jan was we're skipping the action item because we can't vote, and Jan was gonna do the land acknowledgement that's in there. I don't know anything about her land acknowledgement, but I can let you guys know what she has. It's just me reading what's in the agenda, which apparently there's a film screening at the U of O Museum of Natural and Cultural History, which is a very cool place if you haven't been there, called Land Trust, followed by discussion January 25th from 2 to 3:30. Now, unfortunately, I don't know anything about that film to share with you guys, so I don't know if anyone knows like really something really brief that they could share about that film if they know. If not, that's okay. So with that, I would like to move to public comment. And I don't think we have anybody. Do we? You're muted.
We have 2 attendees.
Nobody has their hands up though.
Oh, here. I didn't see them. There we go.
Yeah, no one has raised their hand, so.
Oh, it's John. Hi, John Q. Okay. So if there's no public comment, I will forge ahead to a presentation on the recent state and federal climate policies. So Ian, do you want to go first?
Sure, I can do that.
Yeah, okay.
Do a little bit of a short. So I'm still getting over COVID, so we'll see how long my voice lasts. But I'm gonna give it a go. Give me a second here.
So I'm not sure if you guys all noticed, but just a little while ago, Ian sent out an email with the slides. Okay, just if I didn't know if everyone saw those. Those are nice to have and follow along.
So can everybody see that now? Somebody give me a thumbs up. Yes, okay, great. Thank you.
Yes, we're good. Thank you.
So this is going to be kind of just an update on a presentation I had given to council last fall, but just, we continue to track federal money. We continue to track things that are going on at the state level, just to kind of see how some of the resources and some of these policies are developing over time. So, good evening, commission members, and for everybody else joining us this evening. I am Ian Penn, Sustainability Manager for the city. So I just wanted to spend a little bit of time on both some of the federal climate legislation as well as the state's climate resilience package and where some of those items are currently as this space really does continue to evolve. So starting kind of at the federal level, there's really two primary federal bills that have significant climate-related federal funding opportunities. The first is the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, or IIJA. And this again provides 1.2 trillion in federal spending over 5 years across both competitive and formula programs. And then the second is the Inflation Reduction Act, which represents nearly 400 billion in new programs and incentives, really focused on trying to spur climate and clean energy investments. And moving forward, I'll refer to these as both Bill and IRA. So a little bit more in depth on Bill. Bill was really created against the backdrop of just really decades of underinvestment in infrastructure, underinvestment in bridges, in water, in roads, in transit. And looking at that 1.2 trillion, that's that total bill. The law included nearly 500 billion in new federal funding for infrastructure. So really, things for roads. If you look at the breakdown in front of you, that's the focus of that chart that basically covers the 500 billion that is part of that. And as you can see from that graphic, the big blue box on the left, more than half of the new funding is for transportation infrastructure. And a lot of that's kind of what you consider to be more traditional transportation, surface transportation, airports, bridges. And then there's a little bit of money in that for things like EV charging infrastructure, clean school buses. There's actually a decent amount of money to get, buses off of diesel into EVs, safe streets, things like that. If you look at Bill, that's a more traditional funding mechanism, and because so much of it is infrastructure related, nearly 60% of that is being delivered to states via formula. So a lot of that is not necessarily competitive, although there are competitive programs under Bill, but a lot of it is going straight through to states. And that money is already flowing and will be flowing for the next, 3 more years of money coming out of Bill. It's literally a huge bill. There's hundreds of funding opportunities under Bill, but just to focus on a couple areas that the city has and can actually pursue funding. And that includes, 3 primary things that we've been looking at, in addition to some of the more traditional infrastructure funding for roads, for bridges, for other things that are occurring that could have climate-related impacts, but are really more traditional in terms of, of building roads, Franklin Road, places like that. One is energy efficiency and conservation block grants. For Eugene, this amount was actually determined by formula, but you still have to apply. There's still paperwork you have to do. And the city is going to be submitting paperwork for this. I think the idea right now is to use some of that to focus on city facilities and city operations, similar to what was done previously, but find continued opportunities to, use energy more efficiently, possibilities of fuel switching, but really looking at the city's own buildings and using some of these resources to help move some of that work along for sort of the city's internal climate goals. I think another area is kind of these resilient building codes. These are really grants that are intended to help states and cities really modernize their building codes, doing things like technical assistance, community engagements. Under this program, Eugene has actually partnered with Earth Advantage, NBI, the state, particularly Department of Energy, as well as some other Oregon cities to actually go after a grant that was going to really focus on 2 things that were related. One was energy benchmarking for commercial buildings. And then the second was going to be basically building performance standard technical support development. This was actually a successful grant that was awarded last fall. Earth Advantage spent a couple of months kind of negotiating with the Department of Energy on this. What's interesting is when we were kind of talking about this grant, this was before the state resilience package had passed. So there wasn't at that point a state building performance law, which I'll talk about in a little bit. Initially, we were talking about possibly providing resources, technical assistance. Eugene was really going to be focusing a lot on energy benchmarking initially. working towards potentially a building performance standard. Now that the state has actually passed its law, it's going to be interesting to kind of see where this project goes. We're actually having a kickoff meeting in a couple of weeks to actually see where this is going to go and what the focus is going to be. But there's a decent amount of money for the city to do things like outreach, engagement, and possibly get the ball rolling on energy benchmarking in preparation for a lot of the buildings locally that are going to be impacted by the building performance standard that was passed at the state level. And then the last one is EV charging infrastructure. And this really grants the focus on deploying stations in rural and low-income areas. For this one, the city actually partnered with EWEB and Lane County, really trying to figure out a way to deploy EV charging infrastructure under this program. Unfortunately, while we didn't get this grant, we actually found out a couple weeks ago that we were not a part of this award round of awards, unfortunately. So kind of back to the drawing board to figure out if there's any feedback to try and figure out if there are better ways to do this and to see if we might resubmit in coming years, again, trying to get resources to try and build out some of our EV charging infrastructure in town. So next, kind of moving on to IRA. So IRA really, these are related. And so IRA really builds on Bill, providing nearly $400 billion in clean energy spending and incentives. Really with a lot of programs under IRA specifically targeting low income and disadvantaged communities. IRA kind of diverse funding streams. It's being funded through grants, tax incentives, direct federal spending, as well as things like loan guarantees, mostly through Department of Energy. I think an important part of looking at IRA is that really much of the benefit is going to be seen through the tax code and really seen through the tax code over the next 10 years, rather than through things like competitive grants and other funding. Grants exist, and we're going to, continue to look at those and pursue those, but much of the benefit is actually going to be through the tax code. So really these two areas. So taxes for businesses, and then taxes for individuals, individual households, homeowners, individual taxpayers. The value of these tax credits was actually estimated at about $270 billion. That was based on some assumptions in terms of the uptake. But what's important is that these were uncapped. There's not an upper limit to this. So if there's a lot of appetite, if these incentives are used a lot more broadly, it could actually be 3 or 4 times that. And actually, Goldman Sachs did an analysis of this sometime last summer, June or July, I think, where they actually looked into this, and they thought that the actual value of this could be close to $1 trillion, a little bit over $1.1 trillion if it was uptaken. A lot of the uptake is going to be through businesses, but there's a potential big opportunity here. And a lot of the benefit through the tax code is going to be, through the tax code under IRA. In terms of kind of where the city is focusing its attention, it's really on 2 parts of IRA right now. Really is one is kind of all the grants that are out there. And I'll talk a little bit more about some of the grants that the city has pursued or is looking at or tracking. And then second, again, really through the tax code, in particular, the tax code for individuals and household tax credits. Similar to Bill, IRA, has hundreds of programs, and, I could talk about all of those different programs for hours by themselves, but wanted to cover just a few kind of key program and climate areas. And so one is really sort of the idea of improving building stock through things like energy efficiency. There's a lot of programs under here. One I think worth talking about because there are local implications is it was a nearly $9 billion home efficiency and electrification rebate program. This is something that's going to be implemented by the states, going to be in Oregon, implemented by ODO, Department of Energy, really intended for households who may not be able to take advantage of individual tax credits. So, the gray box that's there, they can't really take advantage of that just because they may not have tax burden. So really, it's a program designed for some of those residences. Really how this program is being designed, I think is actually really helpful. And sort of understanding or recognizing how like really big piles of federal money become much smaller, but probably still important piles of state money. And so going back again to that $8.8 billion figure, Oregon received about $116 million via formula. So a lot of that's based on population. And so Oregon's share of that nearly 9 billion was 116 million. ODO has actually done some analysis of this, and they've estimated that just around 13,000 Oregon households are expected to benefit from this rebate money. And just as context, Oregon has 1.6 or 1.7 million households. So this is really truly like foundational. It's just getting the ball rolling, but it's not nearly enough money to kind of meet the scale of the challenge. But the city's tracking what the state is doing in developing this program and trying to figure out what the rules are going to be and trying to figure out how much of this we can actually get into the hands of Eugene residents. I think another area is really focusing on improving air quality, reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Again, there's a number of programs under this. I think one probably worth talking about is the Climate Pollution Reduction Grants, or CPRG. That might be an acronym that people have heard. This was nearly a $5 billion program. This was done in two phases. There's a planning phase, and then there's an implementation phase. And we're just at the tail end of the planning phase. DEQ is actually the lead for this in the state of Oregon, and they're developing what is called a Priority Climate Action Plan, or a PCAP. The PCAP basically is a list of measures, policies, programs, other things that have greenhouse gas and other co-pollutant benefits. And how this program is designed is that you have to have these measures included in this PCAP, this initial climate action plan, to then be able to go after implementation money. So this would allow Oregon or cities in Oregon to actually then pursue implementation grants and to fund things that are included in that PCAP. There's been a lot of discussion about this. There's a regional group that includes the county, EWEB, LRAPA, some other folks who have been discussing this. We've been talking to DEQ a lot as well, basically trying to understand what DEQ is doing, kind of what's going to be included in this PCAP, and really trying to make sure that local priorities, local interests are going to be included in whatever the state is going to submit to EPA under this program. This is another program where EPA announced last fall that they're going to issue not a huge number of grants. They're going to issue somewhere between 300 and 110, 115 grants, ranging in size from probably 2 million to potentially as much as $500 million. So it's not a lot of awards. And it looks like Oregon is probably going to be submitting a single grant that DEQ will be submitting, largely focused on their roadmap to 2030 that the Global Warming Commission did, and that's going to serve as the foundation for their plan. And so we're going to be tracking that and then seeing how that money, if awarded, how that money then becomes available through various state programs and might be available to local governments, to residents, et cetera, through that. I think a third area under IRA is increasing community climate resilience. There's a bunch of programs under here, I think two worth mentioning. One is the Environmental and Climate Justice Block Grants. These are really supposed to be community-led projects that reduce air pollution, improve pollution monitoring, help maybe build political capacity. A notice of funding came out in December, and this has actually become a new area of focus of potential funding opportunities with, again, some local discussion with the county, with some local community-based organizations to try and figure out kind of what are projects that might be good things to think about and pursue under this grant. And then a second one that I think the commission would be interested in is the U.S. Forest Service has something called the Urban and Community Forestry Program, really intended to increase tree canopy, boost equitable access to nature. This is something that's actually flowing through the state. And it looks like the state forestry program is going to be developing a grant program that's going to be similar to the CREP program for people who know that program. That's the Community Renewable Energy Grant Program. And that's a program that has planning grants, that has implementation grants, so smaller grants for planning projects, larger grants for actually implementing projects. And it looks like the forestry program is going to have a similar model for trying to get trees. And so we're tracking that as well to figure out how some of that money can be used to supplement the street trees program, some of the money that, city staff talked about in front of the commission a couple months ago when they talked about the street trees work. And I think lastly is transportation. And so there's things there available through the tax code. I think a big incentive program here is EPA got about $1 billion basically to focus on replacing heavy duty vehicles, mostly diesel vehicles, with zero emission alternatives. This can cover vehicles, it can cover charging infrastructure, it can cover some workforce development aspects, training. EPA actually put out a request for information last year to try and better understand the marketplace, the medium and heavy duty vehicle marketplace. The sector is not as well developed as light duty vehicles. So things like school buses, garbage trucks are pretty well developed, but other things are less well developed, and it's making it more challenging for for cities, for transit or organizations to invest in some of this, just because some of the technology is maybe not quite ready for large scale deployment. And so EPA is trying to better understand that sector. I think a hope is that a lot of this money is not just going to go to school buses, because that's already a pretty well-developed sector, but that some of this can actually help develop some of these other segments for medium and heavy duty vehicles, so that there are more options for people to actually use in thinking about some of this work. So I think, to pivot a little bit from some of the federal money and then focus on some of the state climate bills. So there were two bills passed last year called the Climate Resilience Package. Basically, there were two omnibus bills that basically did a number of things, but I think the two major ones were that they introduced a bunch of new mandates and programs for state agencies, really for ODO, for the Department of Energy, but other agencies as well. And it really created a bunch of new incentives and regulations for climate work on a bunch of things, including buildings, transportation, green infrastructure. Really what the state sort of was talking about was this was $900 million in state investments to try and leverage federal resources. And it also provided some additional resources for some existing state programs. So the agenda packet that you all got a couple weeks ago now, most of the bills were actually listed with a very brief squib. So these two larger bills that I mentioned were made up of nearly 20 smaller bills when they were initially conceived of, but I think a few key programs to talk about that I think will be of interest. I think the first one is building performance standards, which I talked about previously. Excuse me, sort of as quick definition, a building performance standard, or BPS, is really something that establishes targets for large commercial buildings to first benchmark, but really ultimately reduce energy use or greenhouse gas emissions over time. That's kind of the goal of that. Rulemaking for this has actually begun. Department of Energy began this in December. They're doing engagement, they're doing some outreaching. They've developed an advisory committee, I believe, and really their goal of this, as I understand it right now, is to have a rule in place by the end of this year. So this is proceeding. And I'll talk a little bit more about the BPS in just a second. I think a second one is heat pumps. And so the law, this omnibus bill, created kind of an aspirational goal of installing nearly 500,000 heat pumps statewide by 2030. Again, sort of with a priority on doing this in low income and environmental justice communities. I think a big challenge with this is figuring out how to pay for it, how to incentivize it. That's kind of the next challenge for this, but that's a big important goal. And I think some of the thinking from DEQ on the CPRG money is to basically add additional resources to some of their heat pump rebate programs to help fund some of this work. Excuse me. So one-stop shop. This is really something to try and help people better understand the various rebates and incentives that are out there. For the state, this is really going to start focusing on two of those, the home energy rebate programs I mentioned. One is a whole house program. The second is basically for high efficiency appliances and other associated upgrades. Initially, sorry,
I mean,
how long my
if
voice
you're,
lasts.
how are you doing?
I'm doing okay.
Are you sure?
One more bout of coughing, I might call it quits, but I'm doing okay right now.
Okay.
So the plans for One Stop Shop initially are to help people sort of navigate these two rebate programs. And then the other is to create kind of a web-based tool, and they've hired consultants and that work is underway. So we're tracking that to kind of see what that does. We think that's going to cover some things, but there still might be a local need. And I'll talk a little bit more about some of the thinking that we're doing locally in Eugene to think about kind of what other ways in which we can help people better understand what's available to them. And then the Community Navigator program really complements One Stop Shop, and it's really focused on helping tribes, environmental justice communities, really better understand and connect to technical resources and funding opportunities. And so for that, ODO actually hired somebody in 2023, and they're trying to staff up some of that right now. I think they have 3 people on that staff. And then the law, as I mentioned, provided some additional funding for some existing programs. And so one is solar plus storage, and so they're adding $10 million to that. And then the residential heat pump program, similar to that, it's the existing program. They're adding some resources, and ODO is actually doing some rulemaking right now to clarify some rules, as well as really to try and make it easier or provide some flexibility to become an eligible contractor to actually install heat pumps. And so they're focusing on that. So a little bit more on the BPS. And so this graphic is actually from Odo, and it's kind of an overview of the tiers under this law that have been developed. So really large commercial buildings, the compliance is going to be phased in both based on the size of the building as well as the type of the building. And so commercial buildings are going to be divided into tiers based on building type. And so tier 1, which is kind of that left column, that's focusing on hotels, motels, non-residential buildings with a size equal to or exceeding 35,000 square feet. And that excludes things like parking space. Tier 2. I might be done. Sorry.
Yeah.
Ian, if you want to forward me your presentation, I can finish up.
If people have questions, I can try to answer for right now.
We have the presentation via email. So maybe, Danielle, I don't know how closely you've been collaborating with Ian, if at all, on this presentation. But if it makes sense, maybe you could run through, and then as we wrap up, we can clarify or dig in a little with Ian, including via chat would be perfectly fine. Or you could just drop Ian. Oh, because we can't do chat because it's not viewable. Sorry, that's right, of course. So
We could go through it, and then if we have questions, we could ask next month.
that
Well,
would-
I can sort of wrap up a brief summary based on these slides.
sure.
But
that would be good.
if Ian, you want to send me your presentation, I'm sure you have speaker notes that probably have more detail than, oh, here we go. Okay. Give me a second.
We're pretty close to the end.
I know.
Yeah.
It's gonna take me a second for the attachment to load.
So hello, everyone. Sorry to be jumping in late here too. So I take it, Ian, are you not feeling well? Got some,
He's recovering from COVID, yeah.
oh geez. That's a bummer. It's been going around again.
Here we go. So, maybe Devin, can you share your screen with the slide that he was on? And I'll tell you when to move.
I'm not actually looking at it that way. I'm looking at it on my
Okay.
iPad.
Oh, you're-
but I could pull it up if you need me to.
Is someone else able to share the presentation?
Let me find it. This week's commission. No, I'm sorry. Hold on.
I do have it open.
That would be awesome.
All right.
So,
Thanks, Lexi. You had it faster than me.
So here we are.
yeah. Okay, cool. So it sounds like he had just finished talking about tier 1 buildings. So, yeah, so tier 2 buildings include non-residential and hotels between 20 and 35,000 square feet, and these other use types above 35,000 square feet. June of 2028 is when the first set of tier 1 buildings need to comply. So that's buildings over 20,000 square feet. And benchmarking will begin in that same year for tier 2 buildings. The state legislature has provided $2 million for Odo to establish and administer an incentive program for early and voluntary adopters of building requirements. What we're seeing is that some of the first BPS laws in DC, for example, is that they have been collecting energy benchmarking data from all large buildings for years. Portland has been doing this, but the rest of Oregon has not. So Oregon's laws will use a combination of collecting data and setting a standard at a future date, and using a national standard for larger buildings. You can move on to the next slide. And then I think we wanted to talk a bit more about the program manager idea. One of the ways to ensure available funding and incentive opportunities are maximized is to find ways to combine and leverage funding and incentives from various sources. But it's complicated. There are many moving pieces, and there's not necessarily one entity that covers everything. In particular, when we're thinking about whole house energy retrofits, one way to approach would be to have a single point of contact, a program manager who can consolidate the funding and program services for homeowners and building owners. A program manager idea would allow residents and building owners to determine their retrofit needs, access contractors, and get help accessing resources from multiple funding sources. So for example, the utility, the state, through the tax code, and stacking those. So Ian and I have been moving this along. We've been talking to organizations who could potentially provide this sort of service, while also following how the state's one-stop shop tool is developed to see what type of need there will be locally to fill. That's about it. I'm wondering if you move to the last slide, it was just questions. And I'm wondering if an efficient way to do this, given that Ian is really the expert on a lot of these like state and federal policies, we could just create a list of questions, and then next time we can carve out time for them to be answered. And I mean, it could also be a discussion. I know, Alexi, you probably have been following this. I probably know more than the average person, but I'm by no means an expert. And so, yeah. How does that sound?
I mean, does anyone have any questions? I mean, if there is like one question or two questions, I mean, we can just see.
I think the thing I'm most interested in probably is better to defer for when Ian's back, which is basically having looked into this in some detail. For example, there's a BPS coming to Oregon. What role can the Sustainability Commission play here, given, for example, we've got to focus on multifamily buildings as part of our work plan. That's a portion of the BPS. So I think I'd be interested in hearing from Ian and you, Danielle, but we've only got 1 out of 2 right now, so it doesn't have to be right now. But I'm interested in your thoughts on the Sustainability Commission's role in digging into particular things, thinking about courses of action, and ditto, Councilor Semple, if you've got thoughts on where we fit into this thing. Because these are large programs with large budgets. Great. Some of them are individual tax capabilities. There are state programs that are going to ramp up. We do have an educational focus in some sense, so that maybe we have a way to help raise the flag about some of this stuff. But that's the question that I'd have.
That's a great question. I love that angle. I think from the staff perspective, like we have been kind of trying to answer that same question, like what role can the city, how can we help support businesses or building owners really, come into compliance with like what building performance standards is going to mean for them. We still don't really have an answer to that, but part of it is like education. I think that's the role we're seeing for ourselves as well, is educating them that this is coming, and then ideally hand holding to help them, like help guide them along and handhold, maybe get like a working group together of building owners of similar size and sort of establish a working group so that we can kind of figure it out together. They can figure it out together with the city sort of guiding. But beyond, at this point, honestly, beyond just tracking what's going on, like we're still kind of waiting on the rules to be written. Like we don't have a clear answer yet of what our role is going to be. And I mean, similar to how we shared at the end, like the program navigator role for I think the presentation we talked a little bit about that, addressing residential. We're thinking of what could be a comparable type of, program navigator role for like commercial businesses, commercial buildings in navigating BPS and stuff. So
Right.
still unclear, but I think that's a good discussion to have, is like, what role can the commission play in all of this, of like helping to leverage what's coming. I think that's for the commission to figure out with, all of us here.
Hello.
Ian, hello. You okay?
Sorry, yeah, my computer crashed.
Of course.
Well, we made it through the rest of the slides there, and we're just having a little follow-up consideration or little follow-up discussion, one piece of which was what role should the Sustainability Commission play to help Eugene, either people of Eugene take advantage or support staff and council as we try to figure out all this, as these programs ramp up and the tax credits come up, and there's all sorts of different threads. I have like a kind of a vision of some kind of vast and complicated Gantt chart where there's various programs that are at the state level, and they've got some target date where they might start, and there are tax credits that have already begun, and there are these multiple programs, and they're coming in at different times, and they apply to different sectors. And so I think what you were saying, Danielle, about like a program navigator would be really helpful to your average person this is not their profession, and it's hard to say what are they eligible for, and are there rebates and are there incentives, all those questions there are so many pieces to it, that for an average person it's a little hard to tell where they might land. So that might be a helpful component. I don't know that it needs to be a big complicated Gantt chart, but that's how I'm sort of vaguely thinking about it.
Well, you could start there, but hopefully you could get it more simple, that you could
Yes.
boil it down to some the average person could follow.
Exactly. Yeah, that's not for nobody wants to get into that unless they need to.
I mean, that's a good point though. Like how can the Sustainability Commission help distill this down to like your more general audience? You guys have the Education and Outreach Committee. Is there an opportunity for an item that could be developed on the table? Like, here are the available incentives that you as a, homeowner can take advantage of now, or expect to take advantage of in 6 months.
Yeah. Ideally, it would be great to have something like that. I don't know if we can get to that point, but I think would be super helpful.
And I think something that would be helpful in this, and it's too bad that it's going to be a couple months out, but kind of Beyond Toxics has tried to walk through this with their Bethel Clean Energy project, where they basically tried to do kind of this hand-holding with, it's not wrong, but helping people sort of better understand kind of what the opportunities are, what the needs are, and kind of walk through this process with some homeowners in Bethel, largely through a lens of air quality, but understanding the complications, understanding complexity. And I think kind of hearing a little bit about what they've done, I think would be kind of illuminating for the commission, as well as other folks who are sort of trying to better understand this space. I know that we're paying attention to what they're doing, thinking about how they've kind of, the stumbling blocks and some of the obstacles they've had, as a way of thinking through how do we make this as easy as possible, as accessible as possible, so we can get as much uptake of this as possible.
Right.
Maybe that might be a topic of interest in that the education engagement working group. I think I got the name wrong, but I think we might want to noodle on that in that group.
Yeah.
I think that there's got to be, I mean, one would hope that there would be the appropriate people developing materials. In that's their job. You know what I'm saying? Like, and how we can access already made materials as quickly as possible and be able to then be the people that give out those materials or share ththose materials, and we would help under our own understanding, the non Alexis on the commission, you know, to sort of be able to go, because it's, you know, it's kind of immediate, right? But there's, so it's not like we could just jump in and sort of, I think, be able to develop that type of thing at the level of the Education Outreach Committee, but we could add it into materials that we've already been discussing that for tabling events. And I mean, we could have an outreach event for this. That is an idea that could be floated around to help people understand this kind of thing. We've been talking about having SC specific event, you know, and it could have a focus in a number of topics. That could be the topic for an event, I think, maybe to help people understand
Yeah.
what's out there. But there's got to be materials at some point, I would imagine, for this purpose, but
I would agree. I think it'd be pretty hard for us to try to develop materials. You know, we could, if depending on who's doing that and if that's helpful, I think we could review, we could help, you know, try to clarify, simplify, whatever. But I think, yeah, we need to rely on some others to develop the actual materials, but then could help get them out in various ways, maybe an event or maybe some other ways. So.
I would like to add my sense in there. I think these are perfect. I don't think it's the Sustainability Commission's job to distill this. It's pretty complicated down to an individual level. And it's more complicated because it hasn't all been decided yet. And it's not really going to help to tell people, oh, there's this huge stuff that's going to save us, but the specifics aren't here. That's going to kind of turn them off. So I think that when we can get to a bigger outline, a farther back outline, it would be incredibly helpful if we could help population understand this, and they will be very interested if we tie in how they save money. And it's not only specifically those advantages, but when we get people educated and into these programs, they have some ownership, and then they will be more encouraged to participate in other methods under the cap. So this is really exciting news. And when we get to a point where we can say, here's what's going on, I would just love for us to do that. That would be really, as a counselor, so valuable, because you'd think, you know, we talk to everybody all the time, but we don't really have a way to disseminate this kind of information. That would be great. Thank you.
just real quick, Counselor Simple, that was kind of my understanding. I think like if we get anything out to anybody, it would be more like, this is what you know, sort of like the one-stop shop kind of information. Like, this is what you can do to get incentives that are out there and how you can share in it, rather than like, this is the big picture.
Oh,
This
yeah.
is what's going on.
I
mean,
absolutely agree with you. That's what
Yeah.
I'm trying to
Yes.
say also.
Yeah,
Just
I
give
think,
you support from the counselor of that. We would like that.
yeah, that seems good.
eWeb, you know, IRA tax credits, etc. That we can talk about residential and commercial, and we can put together the ones that are relevant and some curated things that we think are coming in the next year, 6 months or something, right? Keep an eye out for this. But
New stoves. I hear new stoves are coming. That would get a lot of people excited.
thanks. I am not on the education group, but I'd be happy to engage on that topic if that's helpful.
Devin, you've been sharing. I think you can just keep going on ahead if you want. You're muted.
got it. Sorry. Danielle, do we have Ethan? It doesn't look like it. Hopefully he's not downstairs at the LCC. banging on the door.
I've texted him. I sent him a text about 30 minutes ago. I haven't heard anything back.
Oh,
Right.
So I don't think he's coming.
this is what happens when we have to reschedule meetings. Yes.
Right. I mean, it's all kind of confusing, and we got to give everybody a pass, a big pass, tonight. But Ethan, sorry, it's still on my brain. Ian, I want to thank you for your presentation, and you always have so much information and you spew it out at an amazingly fast pace, and I'm very grateful for the slides to follow along. So thank you very much for that, especially when you're like recovering from COVID and still forging ahead. So thank you.
Day
So then,
16 of testing positive.
Wow.
oh God,
Get well soon. Poor thing.
that's unfortunate. I'm sorry. Okay, so next on the agenda is updates from committees, and so Mitra is not here. And let's see. So I don't know, Jan, how do you feel about some food waste update? Do you have any?
I am not on that committee.
Oh, that's right. You're not on that committee. I'm sorry. I just feel like you're on all the committees I'm on.
Not that one. So you
Okay.
you could have an update.
Yeah, I guess I could give a little bit of and maybe Danielle, you could chime in if I'm forgetting something. We really briefly, we had a great meeting, and we had I never remember her last name, Devron, and no, I'm not gonna remember anything. Donnie, because I wasn't expecting to do this, so I don't have any notes or anything in front of me. Come to speak at our meeting about all things food waste, and it was pretty enlightening as far as what the city's priorities are, and because the focus of the committee was more on multifamily buildings, and a lot of barriers were presented to us about why that is not a focus, a primary focus. A lot of it is participation and contamination of the actual yard waste bins, like what's going in there, and there's a lot of contamination when it comes from these larger multifamily buildings. And we were strongly urged by those individuals to sort of switch gears a little bit, if not that necessarily we would say, okay, whatever you say, we're going to do it, but because I still think there's some questions we could ask about a larger multifamily dwelling, and as far as composting is concerned. But what they would really like us to do is focus on individual residential food scrap composting, and getting more like an awareness campaign of how to do it, when to do it, what to put in there, and why they don't use bags, which became very clear to us, and a lot of that kind of information. So it was really just a very, very informative meeting, very productive meeting. So that's I think in a nutshell kind of where we're at. We're going to reassess at our next meeting what questions we could answer for a multifamily unit, and how we might be able to still help despite what the advice we're getting, but also then really focus on educating what they call the low-hanging fruit, which is the individual residential owner. Does anyone have any brief questions about that? I mean, I know it's kind of quick.
Well, before questions, I think the two sort of takeaway, like the two action items that the committee ended on was like, the first was like, write sort of a summary of what was learned so that, the rest of the commission can sort of see that, and that becomes like something that goes to council as well. And also, like, an original part of the committee proposal was researching best practices in other cities for how they have overcome some of those barriers for multifamily. And it seemed like that could still be a worthwhile research project to do. You know, I mean, those might be strategies that the city hasn't looked at yet. And so I think that that would be welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Okay.
So I guess Laura or Alexi, have you had a meeting for the committee? The building art committee?
No, we really should get that started. So it's a good reminder. We have focused on the memo, which just went out today to council about the University of Oregon thermal plant.
Yep.
So
Yep.
time to shift to the next thing. So I'll get that started.
Great. And yeah, just be sure you work with Danielle because she needs to attend the committee meetings and she'll help you with all that stuff.
I am probably going to be staffing that meeting
Oh,
for
all
that
right.
for that committee, but we both of us
Never
might.
mind.
That's, you know, definitely keep Danielle aware, but I probably will be the staff person who's staffing that meeting.
Good.
Great.
Laura, did you want to do the education outreach?
Yeah. So we had one meeting, and we kind of re went over the vision of the group and what we wanted to accomplish. And we do have a question for the committee, but we can't ask it today because of quorum. But basically, we're going through the presentation we made last year and our handout, and have added, things and edited that. And we're going to finalize it at our next meeting, which is coming up, and then bring that to you again at our February meeting. And then our question for you, I'll just throw it out there, is about places that you already are connected with, like neighborhood associations or other type groups. We were going to ask Dennis about faith-based environmental groups, and these are places that we would potentially give the presentation. So if you could just keep that in the back of your mind, and if anyone now wants to share with us, that would be great. Yeah, but that's about it. Jan or Devin, do you want to add anything?
I think that's a reasonable synopsis. I think trying to get our materials updated and reviewed and ready to go to, I think we need to think of a plan of, how many and what kinds of places we think we want to provide the information. Either, I think we're talking about both more formal presentations where we might use a slideshow, and others might be tabling, neighborhood outdoor event type things like we did the last one, and come up with some kind of a reasonable plan of how many we're trying to do and how we want to prioritize, but get our kit of materials and other presentation needs, booth needs, that sort of thing together, so that as things come up, which they will, we'll come up with a plan of what we're going to try to tackle and how we're going to, recruit various commissioners to do different ones and how that's all going to work. But then there will be things that come up and go, hey, could you possibly come give a presentation or come hand out materials at this event? So we want to have that kit ready.
Yeah, so if anyone has groups that you're already connected with or you think we should reach out to, you could just let us know now or think about it and tell us next time.
Yeah,
I would love for you to come to the neighborhood association meetings. I think tabling is great. And that, it depends how many people actually come, but I think, 15 minutes, 20 minutes with a captive audience would be really great. I know the downtown neighbors are always looking for somebody to come talk to them, and JWN's really active. So I'm sure Ted would like to fit that in. Haven't been really in much contact with FAN, but they're a very active organization. I think they've only been meeting every other month. So I don't know the other neighborhood associations, but I think even though they tend to be somewhat small. They're an easy entry point because they have regularly set up meetings, and they have multiple speakers. So it's not like you would need to come and, you know, entertain the whole meeting. Thanks.
Just Councilor Semple, I'm putting together a list of NAs that, and, you know, I went on the calendar and you could easily see what the general meetings are, and depending on what time of year they have their general meetings and stuff like that, where you can get members of the community. So that's definitely a priority in my mind, working with that committee as well. So, and I've reached out to Cindy Kohler as well to try to, because she'll often send emails out to all the, you know, 5 or 6 saying, hey, these people want to talk. Do you have a spot for them? And when's the best time? So we're working with that. She lost everything, like power and all kinds of stuff. And I think my email was lost in that mess. So I'm going to get re-up with her.
The Neighborhood Leaders Council usually has somebody from every association, so that might be an easy way to get in touch with a lot of people.
Unfortunately, I think they're doing a model now where they're no longer having presentations and speakers for now.
Well, I just thought not to present to them, but to tell them that the opportunity is available for us to come to their association meetings. Not to start at that level, just to have, you know, an announcement. Hey, we got this great, exciting thing. Invite us to your meetings. We'll give you 15 minutes of how to save money on a stove.
Right. Yes.
All right. Well, that's it, right, on committees, I believe.
Yeah.
Correct.
Thanks, Jan. I keep thinking you're doing it. I'm sorry. I'm a little not used to doing it. Okay, so commissioner and staff updates. So first off would be you, Councilor Semple, for updates from council.
Thank you. I don't have a lot because we haven't met a lot. We had State of the City back on the 8th, and the mayor gave her speech, and the 4 areas she wanted to work on. Number 1 is climate. So I know that that's going to remain a really big topic for her. It's lucky for the earth. And we've talked about the riverfront urban renewal. We've raised the amount we can collect quite a bit. Hopefully to use it mostly for housing, also safety and incentivizing things there. And then the downtown urban renewal, staff came back with some ideas of how we could both use that for covering permits and SDC charges within a smaller area, and a faster, easier MUPT. Primary thing for council is housing, and that, you know, brings in homeless and jobs. So, you know, density, then you don't have to go so far to that job and drive so far to the grocery store. So we started out with that. We had the ice storm. didn't really do much. We had a report from fire today about how their changes and evolutions are going, as well as a report on the challenges and the amazing response that our people had to take care of us. They're saying it's the worst storm we've ever had as far as effects of losing electricity, and Eugene was in better shape than Springfield and Cottage Grove, but it took a lot of effort. People are still working 16-hour days to get that going. And so the mayor in her speech, she also talked a bit about this money that we just learned about, saying that that's going to be a focus. You know, we can get the money, then we can make changes. So that's pretty cool. And I'm just going to give you this one bit that has not really much to do with us, but it really struck me. Chief Craven said that they have 100 calls every month for overdoses, and of those 35 people die. So somebody's dying every day from a drug overdose. The ones that die have usually succumbed by the time they get there. It's not like they get into the hospital and they die there. So not our topic, but I just found that was really shocking. And there was a ton, surprise, surprise, more broken bones at the hospital. And I had crampons. I just marched all over. It was great. So I think that's about it, because we talked about some of this in the other topics, and really grateful for your participation. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, updates from staff.
I don't have a whole lot, but I wanted to talk about next. I do have most of the presentations lined out for the rest of this year, and the pattern I'd like to get into is if we can, the month before the presentation, carve out, a few minutes. It can be during the staff update time to just collect any broad questions that you might have for that presenter, just so that I can make sure their presentation is sort of geared towards what your interests are. So I think that'll just help establish, make sure that the presentations are relevant, and that you're getting that in turn helps this commission be more effective. And so I was thinking we could just carve out time right now. Next month we have Logan Tellis coming from transportation. He is going to be talking about like the city's electric vehicle strategy, and sort of how Eugene plans to expand access to charging infrastructure, how that charging infrastructure will be accessible for multifamily homes, clarification on incentives and obstacles to getting an EV, what local adoption rates of EVs have been. These are questions that I captured from you all at the retreat, and I shared with him already, and he was like, yeah, I can definitely address those questions, but I'm wondering if there's anything else.
Maybe he's gonna cover this, but like EV charging station requirements for new construction. Like, I know there's parking, but is there EV charging requirements? Like if you build X amount of units, you need to provide X amount of or Y amount of charging spots or something like that.
Okay.
Maybe. Does that sound good to everyone?
And Danielle, a thought on this, do we want to maybe give commissioners, moving forward a couple weeks, but like we'd like to have, questions in front of presenters a week or two before they present. So if commissions, yes, talk about it during a meeting, but then also if there are questions that come up,
Yeah.
pass those along to Danielle, but we'd like to get those like a week before presenters so that they can make sure we're incorporating any of that into their presentation.
Yeah.
I think that would be great, rather than just being it off the top of the head, but also if we know, and we probably do, we could note on the agenda under updates from staff, we'll ask you for feedback on these.
Oh, that's a good idea.
So people will see it on the agenda and start thinking about it.
That's a good idea. I mean, another question that I like that's kind of similar to what Alexia asked earlier, but is like, how can the commission engage on this topic? I think that's a good question. It's a good question. The staff might not necessarily have a pat answer, but it opens up the door to hear directly from, someone who's engaging already on this topic, if they have any ideas for what the commission can do. So I think might be a good question to have sort of as a standard one.
Right. I think interesting when you're talking about transportation and I'm sure that he would cover this probably in his basic information, but helping commissioners understand who are the different parties involved and what do they do? So, you know, the city only is involved in so many things, whereas also, you know, Lane Transit or Lane County, or, you know, everybody, there are roles of other organizations and how that all works out and what the city's role is.
I wonder too if similar, I like that one, Jan. I wrote that down. I wonder too if it could, another good question could be like, is there anything related to this topic that will be coming before council in the next year or so? Because then you kind of get a heads up of like, this is going to be coming up to council in 8 months, you know, that might be another clue as an area for involvement for the commission.
Yep.
That seems super helpful. I mean, and just right, you know, that is the alignment we're looking for, I think, to be able to be effective.
Yeah, I think we can sort of add that as that's a question for all of the topics, really.
Yeah, another maybe thing to bring up regularly, I mean.
All right. Is that it from staff? I wanted
That's
to.
it for me.
What's that?
That's it for me.
Okay.
What were you saying, Devin?
No, nothing.
Okay, so I wanted to, this might be from staff or council, I guess. Ian gave a presentation was December, I think, right, about the fossil fuel risk bonds. And I think that's a topic of interest to the commission. It actually kind of bubbled up from the commission. So do you have a short report on how that went?
Do I get to go?
You were the one, weren't you? You can.
I mean, I'll ask Councilor Semple how it went, but basically, this was the second presentation. So, very brief history. So, a couple of years ago, the organization that sort of came up with this fossil fuel response concept presented to the Sustainability Commission, and I think Councilor Surratt at the time and Councilor Groves participated along with the commission, kind of talking through this kind of idea. I presented to council earlier last year, so in April, I think, of last year, on this concept, and the result of that was a motion to come back with basically a scope of work or proposed scope of work to basically have a consultant, you know, investigate, kind of take the fossil fuel risk bond concept, which really focuses pretty narrowly on large fossil fuel infrastructure. We don't really have that in Eugene. Even, you know, the Kinder Morgan facilities in the county is actually not in the city. The big tank farm that's up near the airport, that's kind of the big fossil fuel infrastructure that we have nearby. We don't really have like a CEI hub in Eugene. And so the idea was to kind of expand sort of this concept and look at or consider other potential risk and hazard within the community. And so I, in December, presented sort of a proposed framework for how the city could consider doing this for council's consideration, to basically say, you know, we've talked to some people, kind of here's a framework to think about it. And if council wanted to proceed, kind of we would recommend staff to focus on this kind of initial phase, kind of get better data, get better information, see what that tells us, and then use that to then make a decision. And so council basically said, yes, we like this approach. You'll go forth and issue an RFP. And so staff are in the process right now of refining the scope. The holiday, my being sick and some other things have kind of put this a little bit behind schedule from where I wanted to be, but we're working on a scope of work, and I'm hoping probably in February we'll be issuing a RFP or an informal RFP, still talking to contracts about how we want to do this, to basically try and, you know, solicit this and get, you know, responses from consultants who could possibly carry out this work and help kind of refine the scope and basically conduct this work.
Great. That's exciting.
I think that's great. You got it perfectly. I'm a little embarrassed to say I was putting things away on my desk in the risk bond IIS I didn't actually read it. I should have again, but I didn't file it away. So it's right there for me to read. And I know in Eugene, the oil trains are really a big concern for people more than faraway plants. So it's a good topic. And
Trains
thank
are
you for your
tricky
work. I'm
because
glad I'm not in charge of
trains are tricky because there's very little jurisdictional authority that the
it.
city has. And what's interesting is like trains roll through here and they don't even let the fire department know. So, even from an emergency response perspective, let alone kind of a longer term perspective, that's a big challenge. But yeah, that's going to be included as well, at least to try and understand kind of what's there. I know the state DEQ has been working on some hazardous oil train rules to try and, at least for really big events, have a little bit of protection there. But yeah, trains, and then looking at just trying to identify, what hazard might exist and what potential risk is presented by that hazard as kind of an initial step, just to get a better sense of what that picture is, which really relates to a lot of these other conversations that council's been having on, chronic polluters and the idea of, industrial development standards and possibly the discussion on gas stations. A lot of it is kind of intertwined, and it feels like this is kind of foundational information that can help inform a lot of those other discussions that are going on at the city.
Cool. Thank you.
Ian, you said RFP development's been pushed back a little. Do you have a target? Did you say that?
I'm hoping early February. I'm close, but it's just been put back a couple of weeks, just, weather and not having power and all that good stuff.
Coming soon then.
But the goal is by mid-February the RFP will be out for responses.
Alrighty. Great, thank you. As usual. Oh, Counselor Semple.
I have something that I forgot to mention. I met yesterday with David Vanderhagen, who I see is in our audience, and we had a wonderful conversation. And one of the things came up was he offered to go up to their facilities in Sherwood and see what it was all about. I think that would be fascinating. And it wasn't just for me. So I'm putting that out there to the commission that if you think that's something that would be interesting to you, you could let me know and I'll let David know. That's it.
Is that a hydrogen facility? Like a
I
hydrogen
think it's
test?
their natural gas and hydrogen. I'm sorry, I put him into the meeting. He can tell us.
Sounds good.
All right, thank you. All right, updates from commission. Nope. Jan, maybe. You're muted, Jan.
Yeah. Okay. How about that?
Sorry.
So I was going to report back that Devin and I and Danielle, Ian met with the mayor and Councilor Semple in our quarterly meeting. Seems like 100 years ago now. So much has happened since then. But I think we had a really good meeting. I do appreciate very much having these regularly scheduled meetings. I think it'll help us to stay in better, contact and understanding with the council. And I think that's the major focus of those is how can we be as effective as possible as a commission and be in line with their work and their priorities and be the best trusted advisor that we can be. And, I think from some of the discussion, we understand that in the past, maybe not immediately past, but some while back, the commissioners were the commission was very active and threw a lot of recommendations and things up to council that they weren't necessarily ready for or have the capacity to deal with. And so we want to work with that. We think we still have some of that reputation to work with, to make it clear. And I think they've appreciated that our work program is pretty focused and we're really working hard to try to stay in alignment with what their priorities are and, still reflect what we think are the priorities and issues of the community and things that may come up, but primarily to try to stay focused. And again, one of the ways we think that that'll be helpful is for commissioners to be in touch with their counselors or some counselor and start having some meetings. And we want to get a little more proactive about getting that rolling. Devin and I can, go with you if you want, when you want to set up meetings for your counselor. So we'll start reaching out to you more directly about those, and we'll have to bring that up again next time so we have more full attendance. But that's an effort we're gonna work on coming up. Anything else to add to that, Devin?
I think that pretty much sums it up. I mean, just to reiterate, we'd really, like commissioners to meet with their counselors. It's a great way to let the counselors know what we do, what we're here for, that we are trusted advisors, and that is in the ordinance, that is our role. So, how can we best accomplish that as well? So I think, if anyone, again, email me, email Jan, if you want to reach out to counselors or reach out to your counselor on your own, however you want to do it, but we're happy to facilitate those meetings as well, if that's helpful. And we'll, like Jan said, we'll reiterate this to the larger group as soon as we can. All righty. Danielle.
I have one more update that I'm not sure if everyone saw the email. Hannah, her seat, she has left the commission. She moved to Corvallis and didn't have capacity to continue serving. And so her seat is vacant. And right now actually is open. Her seat was a at-large position. So and that recruitment is happening right now. So if you know of anyone who you think might make a good candidate for joining the commission, now's the time to get them to apply. And I sent you all an email about that within the last week, I think, to help spread the word. So please do so. Getting in through an at-large seat is a lot easier than getting through one of the council appointed seats.
It's just to add to that, it's slightly different in that it's approved by council, as opposed to being approved by individual, appointed by individual council members. So it's a slightly different process, but yeah, that recruitment's open right now.
That means it will happen, because when you leave it to counselors, some of them, they just don't deal with it. So this is a good opportunity to actually get somebody on the commission.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. And remember, they can be in any ward. There's not an age requirement, as we have Lily, I mean, obviously you want someone maybe older than 7. But that would be my preference, maybe 10. But I think it'd be really cool to get more young people as well, like Lily. But we're a little ahead of schedule because of no Ethan and Alexi.
I just want to clarify. So all applicants get reviewed by council. There's no nominating process? So it's open for a while. When it closes, the council looks at the list as a group?
Yeah, we get all the applications, some short, some long. We review them. We vote on who we'd like to have an interview. And as long as you get 4 votes to have an interview, you'll get one. Something else I was going to say about that.
Okay, that makes sense.
And then, so you get the interview, and then we vote on who we'd like, and it cuts to be a nomination, and usually it just floats through, but sometimes somebody wants a different one and can go back and forth. Not usually, but we get a big notebook of all the applications for all the commissions. So we review those, say who we'd like to interview the winners of that, and then vote.
Got it. Thank you.
Danielle, do people who have applied previously stay in the pool, or do they need to reapply for this round if they wish to be in?
Reapply. You need to
Yeah.
reapply.
Okay,
They're two separate pathways because we stood up the other process to try and
Oh.
formalize it in a more, detailed way.
okay.
And the deadline is February 4th.
Okay.
All right, anybody else? Any other?
Yeah, one more thing. I just wanted to say, I did have something for the land acknowledgement, but
Oh,
because it's tomorrow, I think it is tomorrow, the film viewing, which looks really interesting to me. It's called Land Trust, and it's about using traditional native methods for land restoration in a particular project. I have been in correspondence with, it's sponsored by the Longhouse, but it's being held at the Museum of Natural and Cultural History tomorrow at 2. And I couldn't make it at that time anyway. And now that it's such short time and it's middle of the day, I don't expect anybody will probably be able to do that. So I'm corresponding with them about whether there will be other opportunities to see it either online or somewhere. And I'll get that information back out to the council. I mean, the commission. Yeah, thanks.
Right.
That's it.
thank you for that, Jan. I kind of just read it and I didn't know anything about it. So thank you for the update about that. All right. So without further ado, should we adjourn? Meeting adjourned?
Adjourn.
Yes. A little early.
Thanks,
Thanks everybody for coming.
Thank you. Get well,
Thank
Ian,
you.
please.
Yes, thank you, Ian,
Thanks,
so
Ian.
much.
Appreciate
You
it.
look good.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye everyone.
Bye-bye.